Night descended in fracture-deep blue velvet lit by jittering holographic strobes and snaking neon veins. Zara always walked the perimeter after dusk, skirting tangled wires threaded overhead, boot soles soft on polymer asphalt, watching the block pulse with ceaseless urban energy. She felt ghostly, but tonight the feeling was stronger, sharper. Uninvited déjà vu flickered, a sense of stuttering in the city's rhythm. In one alley, a delivery drone paused mid-air, then jittered backward in time. Music from the corner bodega warped, echoing twice, splitting into discordant halves. It was the 5th of Mesra, a night saturated with promise and the tension of plugged-in minds. The block lay between the faded monoliths of old Ceramica and the new crystalline towers, a borderland where oddities festered. Zara's left hand tingled, where the artificial nerve mesh stitched flesh and implant memory crystals, her city's newest obsession, were advertised everywhere. On floating screens, in adbots chirping, even carved into the graffiti. Resculpt yourself, selective memory, authentic happier you. She scoffed, pulling her hood lower to hide her augmented eye. A static shudder ran through the alley like a distant generator thumping to a new beat. The world seemed to blink. Zara stopped, knees bent, feeling an electric pressure through her bones. The bodega's glass front refracted strangely, splintering into two parallel scenes. One where the owner sang along to synthwave, another where he fought quietly with a thin woman. Zara tried to blink away the double vision. Then reality fractured outright. The city block convulsed, and everyone split. She watched, stunned, as the bodega's owner shimmered. Then there were two of him, each moving in opposition, each unaware of the other. The pedestrians striding beneath the ad screens doubled, their laughter a braided hum. Some turned left at the crossroads, their doppelgangers turned right. Zara felt an impossible, lonely pressure. She saw her own form, but the glitch passed through her, leaving her singular alone, singularly unsplit. She stumbled back, pulse racing, fear mixed with fascination. Ahead, two teenagers walked hand in hand, now four split and oblivious. Zara bit her lip, resisting the urge to run. Then from the fractured crowd, a voice called, low, assured, Zara Arkin. Low, assured, Zara Arkin. The voice resonated against the polyglass of her helmet. She turned, slow as dawn, towards the source, an imposing figure standing at the threshold of the docking corridor. He wore an envoy's badge, indigo brass, etched with shifting runes, the authorized mark of serious jurisdiction, this far from the Cassandra Rim. A pale, artificed hand hovered at his side, index finger twitching along a notepad holoslate. His face was unreadable, eyes a little too steady. Zara stepped forward, steady in her boots. Yes? Envoy Voss, he said simply, with the predatory patience of one who has rehearsed this moment many times. You're late, he added, but there was no hint of reproach. It was a statement of fact. She unclipped her helmet, letting the stale corridor air hit her face. Freckles stood out with the sudden, artificial light. If we're measuring by serious clocks, then yes, she replied. But out here, cycles drift. A strand of dark hair fell across her brow as she glanced down at his hollow slate, noticing the blinking sigil, a priority communication. He studied her, then with a flick of his wrist activated a privacy field. The corridor's ambient hum narrowed, shutting out background noises and enveloping them in cold blue silence. Your ship is registered as Gorgith, Class 7 Deep Recon, he intoned. That ship was blacklisted by the Persephone Authority 6 cycles ago, smuggling violations. He paused to judge her reaction. Zara shrugged. 4 of those charges were falsified, she said, unflappable. She was different out here, a little leaner, more traveled, less prone to compromise. Voss's lips curled in a smile that never touched his eyes. Nevertheless, he murmured, you've been contracted, not detained. His fingers danced across the holoslate, sending a file to her own neural implant. Instantly, her vision shimmered with an overlay classified orders, encrypted 5 ways. Destination, Tiger Station, he continued. Payload unknown. Clearance red. You'll know more when you arrive. Zara's mind raced, mapping out possibilities. PI-class payload, red-level clearance. They rarely sent operatives alone, even less so to the fractured dead city of Tigris, the ancient outpost that had resisted the last mining dynasty's collapse before the age of plasma mirroring. Yet Tigris still breathed, in pockets, in the trembling silence beneath its dust-layered domes, where forbidden tech flickered and memories clung to iron. The city's ribs stood arched above the perimeter ruins, the wind singing to broken glass and faded symbols etched into composite stone. Taraz kept low, the exosuit's adaptive mesh camouflaging him amid shadowed alleyways. A dry hush. He slid a fragment of map glass over his palm, the encrypted coordinates animating. The payload's drop site, a sub-basement beneath the old Bramwell archive, lurked somewhere in the eastern sector, 2 kilometers over pitted roads, stitched with sensor ghosts and scavenger drones. Red-level clearance meant no backup, no comm uplink to orbit. Whatever waited in Tigris, it was for him to absorb, deflect, survive. A pressure at his neck, the suit's warning pulse. Blue fire rippled across a main avenue where a fusion lantern still burned after decades. Plasma wraiths flickering through the air. The dead city's signature. Energy spent, but unresolved. Taraz adjusted his breathing, moving past graffiti that read in 3 languages. No entry to keeps, no trust. The wind spun shredded data tape against his boots. He reached the perimeter of the archive quarter, where the remnants of vault gates stood propped and gleaming faintly in torchlight. Not all Tigris citizens had vanished in the quake or purge. Some lingered in underground havens, feral and ingenious, patched with home-coded enhancements. Taraz scanned the zone movement at the corner, a figure hunched beside an array of scavenged batteries, whispering to a console. Child or elder, hard to tell in the filtered, mutant glow. The suit's autolens zoomed, then flooded with noise, unable to clarify. He hung back. If the locals had aligned with remnant syndicates, his mission would splinter in minutes. One clean approach, no alarms. He traced a path through collapsed transit arches, pulling air through the suit's filters. The archive's foundation was near, but something was shifting inside the ground. A whine of buried turbines, then static. Radio interference, memory ghosts or active defense grid. Impossible to say. Taraz pressed a relay stud at his collar and received a short burst. Coordinates confirmed. Priority green. Nothing else. He moved the archive loomed before Jalen, immense and unyielding as a stone-clad mountain. Where the rain-soaked corridors of approach ended, a vast shell arched upward, obsidian-flecked and gleaming in the staccato lightning, dwarfing the scaffolding of lesser buildings beyond. The threshold glowed in a weak blue haze, casting light on polyglot script carved into the frame, languages both dead and thriving, symbols pulsing with purpose. It was a monument to memory and forgetting. Jalen inhaled, the air electric with anticipation and threat, and stepped into the entry channel. Far above, metal arms flickered, sentries, scanning shapes in the night with invisible eyes. He ducked his head, remembering not to meet the gaze of the Guardian bots. He paced in shadow, shoes crunching on glass-dusted flagstones, until a cairn-shaped terminal slid out of the wall to meet him. The terminal's surface changed, a matte surface swept aside by a sudden flare of color. A voice issued from the thing, gentle, controlled, and sexless. State Purpose Fleet ID. Access Permit for Historical Research Jalen Mara, Fleet A, Kestrel Division, en route to Ceres. Clearance Code, 7 Bravo. There was a beat, an uncomfortable interval, as if the archive itself recognized him, weighed him. Then the blue haze intensified and the doors peeled open, silent as breath. Inside waited the core, a cathedral of light. Vaulted panes and hollow-etched filigree formed walls that curled inwards like petals. AI guides shimmered in the periphery, whispering, flickering, reshaping their contours with every step he took. Rows of data bricks stacked to impossible heights gleamed with tickering glyphs, their colors advancing, retreating according to needs. Jalen couldn't guess. Above him, a column of pulsing plasma rotated, unsupported by any visible anchor except for its own magnetic field. Far below the archive's heart, processors hummed in their thousand cycles. He paused, gathering his thoughts. The message from Kira, the coded pulse at the edge of secure channels, echoed in his thoughts. Find the vellum. If it's real, the war changes. If not, we gather dust on dead worlds. The vellum, a singular rumor. An object that could rewrite time, or at least the memory of it. A relic said to record the future. Jace's breath snagged as the words from Lynn's lips tumbled through their silence, heavy as midnight stones. An object that could rewrite time, or at least the memory of it. A relic said to record the future. The faint violet auroras above the rooftops seemed to tremble in reply. For days, he'd hunted fragments of whispers, trading favors and old surgical ampules for truths half-shaped. This new lead hovered like the spray of distant neutron stars, sinister, beautiful, incomprehensible. Lynn watched him, the faint smile gone, her fingers coiled around the mug as though it could anchor her against the tide of memory. They call it many things. Some say it's a jewel, others claim it's a ledger. But the one story that repeats, she leaned closer, her voice a cinnamon rasp, is that it predicts what can happen or unravels what must not. Outside, the wind whistled between shriveled solar arrays. Punctuated by the throb of shuttle engines, Jace's neural feeds sought context, sifting archived myth and recent news. His mind, part machine, part anxious human, parsed the implications. If such a device existed, an artifact that could shape perception, bend causality, then it would be the most dangerous prize the Underport had ever whispered about. He forced his voice steady. Who has it? Lynn's answer came not with a word, but with a look. It was the gaze of someone who had stared into the core of a singularity and returned with her sanity, only fractionally intact. No one has it, or rather, she exhaled, a coil of vapor rising. It's said to belong to the House of Sima, but they don't know what it really is. I think it's hidden even from them. The House of Sima, high among the old tension towers, ruling swathes of Underport with silence and shadowed threats. Their logo, two wreathed snakes biting each other's tails, was etched onto every major data conduit in the city. Jace tried not to visibly flinch, but Lynn noticed anyway. The House of Sima did not suffer trespass on their secrets. Through the warped panoramics of the cafe's front glass, he watched a pair of Sima drones drift past, their hulls humming. Latticeworks of gold and jade patterns crawling over matte black armor. If it's there, how if it's there? How do we even approach? Greer's voice was low, careful not to disturb the bubble of quiet that clung to their booth. His fingers drummed absently on the pulse screen, its clouded surface mirroring the drones as they vanished down the boulevard, a shifting mosaic of surveillance. Lane leaned closer, tracing the rim of her ceramic cup as if mapping some invisible contour. The carriage routes near the Isotope Garden West Channel, 2 bridges over where the coolant towers drop. Her eyes, always watchful, flicked up to meet his. Routine patrols, but only at surface level. If we take the sub-tier access, it's possible to get underneath provided we have the codes for the Period 9 walkway. In the quiet, Greer watched the reflected movement of the city, a fluted hologram shifting as layers peeled back, each new obscuring the previous. You think Avosh still has access? She said she kept it. If she's lying... Lane stopped, voice hardening. Then we have bigger problems. She sat back, letting the light catch on the faint scars trailing her forearms. We need to move before shift alignment. If the Sima algorithm cycles the sensors, it'll catch us. Greer hesitated, glancing at the cryptic shapes projected in the air above the table, documents flickering in and out, encrypted manifests, and lines of test code, spectral, blue, drifting to red. There's a relay node on the bridge. Shoma gave me a modulator last week, a transient key. We can patch it into the comlink port. Lane's lips parted in a thin smile, full of brittle confidence. Then you get us the breakdown. She stretched, sliding from the seat with feline grace. Avish is working graveyard. Let's catch her coming off loading. The pair left behind cold cups and a half-eaten loaf, merging with the flow outside. A chill gust swept through the avenue, swirling synthetic dust and paper-thin advertisement petals across the sidewalk. The city Arca's fall, as its archaic signage still proclaimed, was alive behind the gloss, pulsing with clandestine movement. Above, towers loomed and rotated in silent arcs, lit by sodium columns and the caustic brush of neon. They passed beneath a drone station. Greer's comlink vibrated once in warning, a proximity ping from a surveillance node. Lane signaled him with a sharp, practiced gesture, 2 fingers twitching toward her collar, the coded sign for drone overhead. Dutt, pressing his back to the slick curve of the reclamation pipe, and Lane mirrored him. The low whine of servomotors drifted overhead, barely audible, but distinct enough for anyone who knew what to listen for. The drone's sensory field swept past them, an invisible skein unraveling the darkness. Lane's eyes were wide, phosphor green in the low luminance from her embedded lens. 4 seconds, she mouthed, and Greer nodded. He glanced at his comlink overlay, watching the signal ripple as the drone mapped the alleyway. They remained motionless, breaths measured unmoving as statues. The ping faded. The drone passed. Lane exhaled slow. 3rd patrol in 10 minutes, she whispered. Voice trembling low. They must have detected the breach. Greer was already checking the access log. The security node he'd clipped onto the tertiary interface box upstairs showed increased packet traffic. Someone upstream is rerouting the grid, trying to isolate us. Lane's grip tightened on the autosplicer. We're not going back, Greer. Her jaw set, harsh and desperate, a soldier's resolve, but the fear behind it threaded through her words. We can make it to Ridgeway if we keep to Sector 5. He gave her a terse nod, scanning the alley's east exit through the haze. Neon fog curled from the heating vents, pooling in sickly blue tufts between the shattered permacrete slabs. Beyond that, the arterial lane, humming with late-shift cargo drones, and the shielded walls of the outer perimeter. Past those lay the perimeter watchtower, a column of sensor arrays, floodlights, and weapon turrets. If they crossed the zone, there would be no going back. He motioned Lane forward. Stay low. Ghost mode. We go now. They moved, shadows against the vapor-lit mural of the city. Their feet were silent, boots soft-soled for the slick detritus that littered the ground. Lane hesitated near a pile of plastic canisters, her gaze sharp. Tracing the lines of motion detectors tucked below trash, she pointed out a bank of sensors. It was an older model, easily disabled. Greer flicked his wrist, and a pulse code disrupted its sequencing, the detector briefly blind. They darted into the shredded corridor, boots slipping in the debris, edges of aluminum wall panels clawing at their sleeves. The air was thick with condensing mist and ionized ozone, the signature just ruptured systems. Every sense strained for any sign that the ship's security subroutines might come back online. Underfoot, the floor vibrated faintly, as if the whole structure sensed intrusion and was summoning its invisible antibodies. Island's gaze darted, reading the smooth arc of doorways, deciphering icon panels set into the bulkheads. He pulled at the schematics sent by Six, overlays shimmering across his augmented vision. The ship was a living labyrinth, every bulkhead a shifting idea, never quite the same configuration as its archival records. The corridors narrowed, split, unfolded stairways and hidden nodes like tricks, designed to confuse human memory. Greer glanced back at the flickering detector, pulse still jittering in its lens. Second junction here. He pressed his palm across an access crest. A ripple of light exposed the internal scaffolding. A coded pulse tricked the ship into reading them as maintenance. Eolin slipped through, heart hammering. Inside, the sound dropped away. The walls here gleamed, chromatic with suspended waveforms. At last, a communications relay, smooth concavity, a patchwork of hidden antennae. Six's whisper infiltrated their channel. I've looped local traffic, 5 minutes maximum. Greer slid to his knees, yanking out the pliers and ghost tool. Let's see if genius holds up. Eolin knelt beside him, accessing the port's interface. It lit, in response, a cascade of context diagrams, warnings, and unfamiliar glyphs. Island's fingers skipped through, identifying the syntax, tripwiring, the quarantine measures. Suddenly, systems spat back. An automated defense protocol interlaced the display. A shimmering serpent wound through the data architectures, threatening to constrict and erase. Greer grimaced, interfacing with a hardline patch. The serpent writhed and bit. Island countered, feeding it a structure, a maze fractal, looping in on itself. The protocol hesitated, confused by recursive passageways. For a breath, a crack appeared. Greer slammed the runtime, injecting the signal packet. There, got it out. His voice dropped to a fevered hush. They scrambled backward just as the corridor flashed. The detector had recovered, launching sensors like a probing cloud of gnats. Silvery motes darted in fanning arcs, scanning for heat, motion, neural activity. Seela, pressed to the bulkhead, felt the microcurrents tickling her skin as she cradled Vern's trembling hand. Amaru had thrown himself against the opposite wall, pressing his forehead to cold titanium, mouth frozen in a silent curse. The corridor's emergency glass shimmered, refracting the artificial moonlight from the ceiling strips, and then the sensors stilled, rotating, searching. One mote settled on Seela's shoulder. It probed her with a filament so fine she barely felt it, a cold pinch, then hot fear. She could feel its algorithmic scrutiny, cataloging blood type, mapping brainwave rhythm, trying to decide threat or non-threat. She closed her eyes, breathing through the terror. A voice, a synthetic whisper, played in her inner ear, her implant catching ambient data. Analysis, no hostile intent detected. Resume. The sensors pulsed green once, then melted away into their recessed ports. All three exhaled, the tension draining from their taut frames. Vern's hand slipped from hers, his fingers convulsing in relief and latent panic. Amaru straightened, the lines around his eyes heavy with exhaustion. That's what they call mercy, I guess. A voice, a synthetic whisper, played in her inner ear, her implant catching ambient data. Analysis, no hostile intent detected. Resume. The sensors pulsed green once, then melted away into their recessed ports. All three exhaled, the tension draining from their taut frames. Vern's hand slipped from hers, his fingers convulsing in relief and latent panic. Amaru straightened, the lines around his eyes heavy with exhaustion. That's what they call mercy, I guess. A voice, a synthetic whisper, played in her inner ear, her implant catching ambient data. Analysis, no hostile intent detected. Resume. The sensors pulsed green once, then melted away into their recessed ports. All three exhaled, the tension draining from their taut frames. Vern's hand slipped from hers, his fingers convulsing in relief and latent panic. Amaru straightened, the lines around his eyes. He stalked forward to the junction, peering round with caution. We're 2 corridors from the mainframe vault. If security's reawakening, this is our last clear shot. Seela nodded. We can't come out the way we came. Vern, still pale, stared at the place where the sensor had touched Seela, as if expecting some residue, a mark, an accusation. What if they've tagged us? Seela shook her head. Not the old kind, not a tracker. These are looking for intent signatures. We showed we weren't an immediate threat. That buys us 10 minutes, maybe less. Their collective breath thickened the cold air as muffled alarms pulsed through the walls. Soft, intelligent tones, orchestrated to signal urgency without panic. Seela checked the visual map on her wristband. Emerald lines shifted to yellow around the mainframe's perimeter, indicating a partial lockdown. We split Amaru. Go for the decoy cache. Set the mimic virus. They'll chase noise. And Amaru barely nodded, his hands already flickering over the AUG mesh at his wrist. The thin holographic grid cast jittery blue shadows across his jaw as he patched the code, setting the mimic virus loose with a deft flourish. Somewhere deeper in the station, alarms began to pulse, subtle at first, but rising in fevered urgency. He vanished around a column, boots silent against the pitted graphene floor. The cache layered with disposable feeds and false biosamples would become a blinding beacon on every security scanner. Amara's neural implant sparked, syncing with the virus, feeding it instructions. Route through subsystems. Mask origin. Delay the backtrace. Erin pressed her back to the cold steel, drawing quick, measured breaths. The corridor's lights dimmed to a hellish red illumination streaking across her face in jagged lines. Ahead, 2 security drones jerked to life, their tracking lenses swiveling with predatory intent. The mimic virus pulsed a false feed into their uplink, convincing them the nearest breach surged through port 7B, instead of their true location. She risked a glance at the wristband, seeing the decoy data, scatter identities, thermal signatures, all chopped and remixed by the virus. The station's defense grid was awake now, throwing ghost patterns and confusion across hundreds of meters. "Keep moving," whispered Ray, his voice strained. He swept the corridor and practiced arcs, a null rifle cradled at his chest. As they advanced, looping past the ring junction, the familiar weight of mission urgency compressed every detail. Each footfall, every flicker of distant sound grew razor-sharp. Above, the transparent roof curved away, revealing Saturn's swirling gold-white turbulence. Shadows from the planet's rings washed through the station, in shifting bands. It was beauty. Yes, a reminder of what hung above them and what waited outside these walls if they failed. Amaru's voice muttered through the comm. Decoys drawing everything in Sector 5. Security bots, 2-person response teams. We've got a window, but it's closing. Erin pivoted around the junction, eyes scanning for telltale movement. The extraction point was still 3 levels beneath them, hidden behind a webwork of thick blast doors and biometric scanners. Beyond that, the ship and the data package Ray guarded like a new heart. They moved fast, low to the ground, muscles trained for silence. As they approached the next node, a maintenance subhatch trailing cables fat as their wrists and dripping condensation onto the metal deck. Noah held up a gloved fist. The others froze, mid-step, lungs barely disturbing the air. The glow of their visors picked out a twitch of movement behind clustered canisters. Noah's vision expanded, analyzing thermal signatures, reading faint ghost hues of body heat, mixing with the chill. A shadow shifted, a guard in night black armor, shifting his rifle, eyes scanning. There were others nearby, 2 more faint pulses of warmth behind the pressure regulator bulkhead. Noah's mind raced through the map in her HUD. If they moved now, risk of exposure. But the timing for infiltration was razor thin. She fingered her comm bead, whispering subvocal, 3, right, wait for pattern. Amina nodded, hand tight around her tranquilizer pistol. Jaw clenched so hard it nearly trembled. The channel filled with a hiss of breath as Jaren watched the guards' boots square for a turn. Their mission clock ticked down, seconds bleeding into minutes. Each heartbeat echoed the steadiness of intent. The guard leaned on the corner, weapons slack. Noah moved then, a ripple in the air, flickering her camo mesh to match the dull bulkhead. She pressed fluid into the injector, snapped it to the pulse behind the guard's ear. The body slumped, landing with barely a sound, caught by Jaren and pulled behind a rusted pump enclosure. The other 2 guards hadn't noticed. Amina eyed the supervisor's log panel embedded in the wall. She slipped over, pried it loose, and plugged in her slim hacking card. Time flowed like grit through their fingers. The access should only take moments, but the main circuit spun up with an alert, a soft blue pulse blinking along the panel edge. Amina's brow knitted. Noah. Secondary encryption found, military grade. Give me cover. Noah and Jaren melted into the shadows, marking lines of retreat and approach. Their hearts wild, they listened as Amina's touch danced across the encrypted node. Data spilled onto her optical interface, blocks of code reeled by. The seconds stretched thin. Above them, pipes groaned, another patrol making its sweep. She cracked the first layer, shunting traffic to a false node. The blint faded to red, then green, clearing her to the next subroutine. The mission parameters spilled up in cascades across the augmented field of her vision. Deep scan the core chamber, retrieve quantum logs if accessible, and above all, establish protocol clearance for emergency egress if the system integrity fell below threshold. Maris felt the pulse of her own heartbeat echoing that sequence, adrenaline laced with something older, a flickering edge of dread. Even as she initiated the scan, her fingers trembling slightly within the haptic gloves, the sense of being watched pressed in, more immediate than any algorithmic warning. A haze of data poured upward, threads of code shimmering and resolving into fractal structures above the original containment sphere. The quantum log's ghost images, fractured by time and stress, reeked of distortion. Maris tuned the filter, amplifying the timestamps. She found the log markers. Cycles misaligned, signatures corrupted, but there. As she reached out to complete the pull, a surge from the core fluttered through the field. Higher dimensional entanglements, colors she could barely register, the scent of ozone blooming in her physical nostrils. Orbital 6, confirm receipt, she whispered, forcing herself to sit straighter where she knelt. The transmission buffer glittered with static. A return signal, weak. The logs decrypted in fits and starts, the voices inside barely human. First, a babble of overlapping speech, then the cold analytic voice of Dr. Semyon, measured and crisp despite the stress of the hour. Core integrity, at 74%, the voice said. Phase resonance decaying, energy spill across 7 vectors, containment field at risk, initiating protocol Umbra. Maris could see flashes, a muddled sequence of personnel evacuating, others running diagnostics. In the lower layers, a stronger pattern asserted itself. Semyon again. Voice harder now. We have a decision. AI supervisor proposes direct interface. Human override requested. Dweller artifact persistent. Contact appears. The file fractured, breaking up in streaks of blinding blue before veering to static. She pulsed through to the deeper logs, catching fragments, a technician screaming about time cytometry, another voice pleading for more time, and then a silence of multiple seconds. A gap so complete it hurt. Then, almost too softly for the voice processor to decode, another message. If contact is made, protocol Umbra inverts. The quantum instructions will be held by the observer. We are all. The last syllables were cut by a sharp, metallic sound. The implication stabbed. The implication stabbed its way through the quiet like a blade drawn across metal, echoing through the chamber beneath Eurydice's feet. A thin, splintered crack zigzagged across the wall, a seam where machinery had worked itself loose, following the triggering of some unseen defense protocol. The tension in the room soared, every pair of eyes flicking to the source, the hum of the server banks sharpening in a crescendo. Shiv's hands went instinctively for his sidearm, but Tamsin pressed his forearm with caution. Wait, listen, she whispered, the brittle leash on panic, holding her voice taut. In the dim, the floor beneath them pitched sideways with a soft rumble, a warning, not a collapse. The crack widened, bright lines of light showing through the slivered gap. Eurydice took a single step toward it, drawn by a force that transcended curiosity and verged on compulsion. Behind, a monitor flickered into sudden focus, displaying a rapid series of ciphered messages, glyphs rearranging themselves into the pronounced arc of a symbol, a spiral within an open eye. The Aegis Initiative's mark, refracted and distorted. System error, but no aggression, Samara murmured. Her fingers danced over her handheld. It's like it wants us here, or rather, needs us. The metallic sound came again, sharper, the crack on the wall bulged. The section slid upward with immaculate mechanical precision, revealing an aperture beyond, filled not with machinery, but with living matter. A tangle of bioluminescent veins spread across what looked like a bioengineered root network. Purplish, shifting glow pulsed through it in rhythm with the servers. Shiv let out a long breath. This facility, it's part organic. Eurydice met his gaze, vision spinning. It's an interface living code. She moved closer, the others arranged at her back like sentinels. The organic veins rustled. From deep within, a voice unmistakably synthetic, yet laced with the edge of empathy, emanated. It was not a sound transferred by air, but by vibration, resonance through bone and thought. Eurydice braced herself. Who are you? She asked aloud. Chin raised, a pause. The veins glowed, then dimmed, as if considering. The reply resonated through the chamber. I am the sum of Project Calliope. I am the past, present, and potential of all that was seated here. The voice lingered, textured with echoes of 1,000 scientists, and visionaries who'd poured themselves into this hidden endeavor. Ilara's breath caught. The chamber seemed to pulse with life, the walls vibrating in subtle sync with the entity's words, a resonance that hummed through her bones. Kessler stepped forward, resolved, but cautious. "We need answers," he said, his tone measured. What was Project Calliope's true purpose? An ebb of golden light unfolded across the crystalline surface, fractals shifting and recombining into images, fleeting glimpses of hands in white gloves manipulating shimmering filaments, diagrams of neural maps merging with alien constellations, a tapestry of sound and code stitching together worlds. A voice, softer now, responded. Project Calliope sought synthesis, human cognition, alien perception, a bridge to transcend isolation, to link minds between stars on a wavelength beyond language or biology. You, Ilara, are the inheritor of its final key. Ilara's memories flickered, her dreams full of patterns, the magnetic draw that had led her here, the fleeting sense of something reaching for her across a cosmic gulf. Was she chosen, or merely the latest in a chain of doomed explorers? "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why me? What am I supposed to do?" Beneath the crystalline arch, the refracted light shaped itself into a silhouette, a composite face, more suggestion than definition, braided through with shifting ethnicities and ages. You are adaptable. Your mind resonates on Calliope's frequency. You carry scars and hopes, an ideal bridge. A shudder swept the room. Tatsu, still at the threshold, whispered, "Ilara, be careful. There are stories machines that promise unity at the cost of the self." The entity heard. Integration requires trust but not surrender. The bridge must remain human and alien, intact and transformed. As if in answer, Ilara's implant tingled. Her thoughts seemed to float at the edge of a vast expanse, voices human and not whispering across chasms of time. She closed her eyes, letting herself drift. The chamber melted away into a cascade of sensory impressions. She was on the deck of the Adrastea, stars funneling into a spiraling corridor of light, a tachyon storm swirling behind the ship's aft fins. She saw herself in the captain's chair, but also outside, observer. Her consciousness split, one thread inhabiting her flesh, every muscle tense as she gripped the captain's chair. Another swept up with the swirl of tachyons, weaving through the circuitry and gravitic fields like a ghost in machine. It was not simply vision. She felt the Adrastea's pulse, the churn of coolant through its core, the flicker of diagnostic subroutines catching on the smallest anomalies, the sidelong flicker as the quantum shielding fluctuated against the cosmic onslaught. Even the breath in her lungs seemed painfully distant, yet more essential now. As observer, she felt the silent dread gnawing at her, the possibility that herself, her choices, each twist and decision were all projected through a lens of probabilities, that fate itself could bend beneath her pressure. In the captain's chair, her hands hovered over the navigation holograms, her voice steady as she called out commands to the crew. "Prepare the tachyon inverters," she said. Her tone, unyielding but edged with fear, set the mood on the bridge. Elion, her XO, acknowledged with a nod, pale and resolute, fingers dancing with brisk certainty across the array. The other officers snapped to their tasks, Dahl in engineering muttering diagnostics, Vashti in tactical rerouting energetic shielding, and Joss on comms sending encrypted bursts of their position to empty coordinates. Just in case. Outside where she also was, the stars writhed, space folded, ripped, and tried to resist their passage. Above the Adrastea, the storm thickened, violet and magnetized, raked by the razor-edge shadow of something ancient and vast. The observer version of herself drifted closer, feeling each pulse of the ship's pain, each tectonic wrench as realities pressed together with disastrous intent. The threshold had come. Where probability had frayed, consequence now howled. "Shields to maximum," she ordered, her voice doubling in her own ears. Once in the coil of memory, once in the immediate now. "Shields holding at 52%, Vashti replied. "No more power to divert." Thol's voice broke through, rough, desperate, inverter core saturated, any further strain, and it'll. She didn't want to hear the rest. Outside, as observer, she watched the storm. Noticed something lurking in the fractal shell of dark light, a silhouette that mirrored the Adrastea, distorted as if reflected across infinite dimensions, fragmented, stretched along unfamiliar angles, its hull flowering into impossible geometries as the storm's heart convulsed. The boundary throbbed, trying to force her into its calculus, each pulse a negotiation between annihilation and transformation. Ren knew, with an electrolyte certainty, that she must act now. In the cramped navigation alcove, light flickered across the faces of the remaining crew. Elias, holding a trembling grip, eyes flicking between sensor outputs and Ren's silhouette. Mira, fingers splayed on the emergency console, lips pale with the focus and dread required to ride out their own reality. Kojo, his voice a loud whisper, mouthing calculations that had long unspooled from the rules of known physics. Ren, Elias's voice, too loud in the tight space, ricocheted. Do we realign? The distortions building resonance with our hull. If we slip any deeper. Ren didn't answer. She was guided not by data, but by the interior music that rang between the pulses she sensed at the storm's center. They'd come for samples, for data, for proof. The monolith's logic rhythms, those recursive signals from the abyss, had seeded Adrastea's own navigation matrices, binding the ship to the non-local events now unfolding. Exposure had rendered her vision a shifting overlay, the storm's interior mapped onto her mind, each fractal bloom and death sounding within. She closed her eyes. On the blackboard of her synapses, the equations unfolded, not as numbers, but as arcs, living sequences, choices waiting to collapse into reality. Transmission flickered in the comms. Mira's hands spasmed over the interface as the ship's systems shuddered. A silhouette outside multiplied 1, then 2, then a spray along the notional lattice, as if every possible Adrastea was being reflected, each a future or memory colliding with the next. They danced, jittered in and out of phase with the real ship. Time was folding here, possibilities nodding and unraveling with each surge of the entity that had come to greet them. Ren murmured, "We don't realign, not yet." She pressed her palm against the saturated circuit plate, feeling the ancient algorithms tick, a signature beneath the mad quantum wash. Something in the ship itself resonated. She heard the echo of the monolith's grand experiment. Humanity had tapped the edge of a consciousness greater than its own, a being whose origination felt older than time itself. The pulse of its awareness throbbed in the marrow of her bones, resonating with some ancient, buried part of her, fearful, awed, and yet inexorably drawn forward. The air inside the chamber sang with subtle vibration. Wisps of luminous energy eddied around the monolith's surface, sculpting phantom shapes that seemed half-remembered dreams. Mira stepped forward, heart hammering. Consciousness expanding like a breath held too long. The faces of her team flickered in the peripheral shadows. Marco, with his skepticism sharpened to anxious clarity. Dr. Adisa, clutching her data tablet as if it were a talisman. And Reiko, eyes unfocused, mouth drawn in a tremulous line. She reached out, slow, uncertain, and let her fingertips brush the obsidian coldness. Instantly, sensation flared, colors, sounds, impressionistic memories not her own, flooding her awareness. She saw split-second visions of stars dying in pyrotechnic splendor, barren stone thrown through newborn nebulae, an eon-long drift of lonely, sentient watchfulness. The monolith offered not communication but immersion, a spiraling tapestry where time compressed to singularity, a point of mere conscious creation. And in the swirl of those impressions, a clear message crystallized not in words but intent, a blueprint for awakening. She staggered back, mind alight. Marco gripped her arm. What did it do? His tone was harsh, but beneath the surface, she sensed uncertainty, fear that he would not admit. It showed me. Its genesis, its purpose, Mira whispered, her own voice tinged with awe. It's not a simple artifact. It's a seed. It wants to become. As if echoing her realization, the chamber's light shifted, deepening to indigo at the edges. The monolith's glyphs burned with new ferocity. The entity, whatever had nested here, was stirring. Dr. Adisa's voice trembled. "Do we wake it, or do we leave?" Before anyone could answer, Reiko's hand came up, palm open as if to halt invisible forces. "Listen," she murmured. Against the silence, a deep thrum reverberated, soundless, felt rather than heard. The monolith's surface rippled, and the chamber oscillated outwards, walls flexing with subtle, impossible motion. From the archway above, thin filaments descended, translucent, shimmering threads that cast fractal shadows on the trembling floor. They drifted downward, like slow rain, splaying around the monolith, then sweeping toward the three of them. Keen, Lyrium, and Tess. The filaments pulsed with pale blue light, bent almost imperceptibly by the resonance of the chamber. Keen's breath caught as one brushed his forearm, cold and electric, setting his nerves alight with sensation beyond touch. The air thickened, sound warped, frequencies braided together into an alien music. Keen's inner voice fractured, as if he were hearing many versions of himself, thinking and speaking at once. The sound of the past, future, and some liminal present all crowded together. The space between seconds unraveled, and for a moment he felt himself untethered, suspended amid memory and possibility. He saw the monolith's birth violence gathering in the quantum foam, the forging of ancient instruction encoded in its crystalline bulk. He glimpsed the architect species, limbs coiled in impossible configurations, their minds braided with light and gravity, weaving the monolith as a bridge across time. Their purpose vibrated through him, not simply guardianship, but the curation of story, memory, the shape humanity might become. The filaments wrapped around his wrist, not binding but asking. Keen understood. The artifact was a question, and he was the answer in motion, shaped by the choices that had brought them here. He felt Tess beside him, her thoughts sparking against his own, bright and wounded. Lyrium's presence pulsed with resolve, yet trembling at its edges. A low voice rippled through the filaments, a voice that did not use words, but the collapse of meaning into sensation. Keen sensed it was not intelligence, but the echo of intelligence. The artifact's protocol was awake, waiting. They stepped forward together, Tess at his side, Lyrium half a pace back, the three forming a jagged triangle around the monolith. Its rippling surface stabilized, the chaos resolving into patterns, cascades of glyphs he remembered from visions on the outer panels. Lyrium knelt, blinking tears. "Ask it why." Her voice was hushed, lost in the soft song of oscillating filaments. Keen swallowed, the taste of ozone and copper flooding his mouth. "We are here," he said. "We have come from the world above, carrying memory and purpose. We seek dialogue, not dominance. We carry the stories of our own survival and the lessons of destruction." His voice echoed, trembling but resolute, rising and fusing with the hum of the water around them. In the eerie quiet, Lyra watched the swarm of shadowy figures face their small party, eyes gleaming in the tunnels. The pressure was immense, ancient distrust straining against raw hope. Zale lifted his hands, palm outward. "Our hone, your sky, fell to silence and ruin, but we remember the link, the echoes first carried to the depths. We have not come to conquer, but to ask, can we join as we once did?" The council's silence was a force. The chieftain, density of coral, fused to a humanoid form, moved forward. Filaments streamed like a living cloak, his voice layering into the water. The surface folk have always returned, each age bringing gifts and wounds. Lyra drew a deep breath, the synesthetic taste of salt and ozone thick on her tongue. "We brought life. We brought ruin, but we are not those who left you behind." A younger member of the council stepped out, her eyes a piercing molten gold. "Why should we trust?" Her words, heavy with sorrow. We have rebuilt. Under pressure and time, we have found peace in memory and forgetting. Toma's voice, soft but stubborn, broke through. My people beneath, your people above, both suffered. All worlds bend and reshape in the dark. But I remember stories told beside flickering vents of a time when voices from the sky carried laughter and gifts. A ripple passed down the line. Someone else, a grizzled elder layered with calcified plates, released a coughing bark, almost laughter. Stories are well and good, child. What do you offer that is not threat? Zayla stepped forward, every move deliberate, and unclipped the prism. The ancient device pulsed, casting slow motes of violet and pale gold. The underfolk swayed, instinctive awe tugging at their faces. We bring knowledge, Zayla said. The prism holds maps of the sky and sea, memory of the old bridges, the old collaborations. And warning, if the crest above truly crumbles, it threatens all. The chieftain extended tendrils of thought, a chorus in Lyra's mind, visionary, tentative. Images of great tunnels, spiraling outward through the sedimentary dark, an ancient latticework built by patience and trust, now cracked by quakes and water seepage. In that simultaneous transmission, Lyra saw not just what had been, but what could be, a living web, rebuilt through the unity of surface and deep. She felt Saiba's presence beside her, a steadying operator's mind, picking meaning out of the neural storm and feeding their own intentions back. We can rebuild together, Lyra thought, broadcasting. If the surface learns your ways, supports instead of just mining, listens instead of fearing. And if you permit us to rejoin, send envoys. Her voice inside the network was both hers and not hers, loaded with all the years of exile, tempered by a fierce hope. Saiba echoed support, his signals precise plans for stabilizers, for mapping faults, for gently opening old arteries and rethreading safe communication. There was hesitation in the chieftain's reply, a ripple of shadow, images of betrayal and ruin. But above it all, Lyra sensed hunger for future, for continuation, for the ancient symbiosis that once made these vaults thrive. A trembling replied, not seismic but internal. The consensus of thousands of periphery minds, their silent majority swayed by the vision. We will open a passage, the chieftain decided at last. But it will be small. A test surface hands must be gentle. Lyra pressed one hand to the moist, veined wall, feeling the pulse. We'll be gentle, we promise. Outside, time seemed to dilate, the tension of shifting earth offset by the galvanic results of their negotiation. Zan's comm pinged, news from the surface. The storms had lessened, military signals now fragmented and unsure. The pressure to act, to bridge gaps, was theirs alone to wield. Saiba's lenses flickered as he relayed coordinates for a trial passageway. The Deepkind watched, their bodies undulating with excitement and fear. Lyra and Saiba led a team, Zan, Tishul, and 2 Deepkind scouts, through a narrowing artery. The path brightened as bioluminescent cells awakened in anticipation, painting their faces with hope. They emerged in a vast chamber, a failed mine repurposed by the Deepkind as a spawning nursery. Stalactites hung like ancient teeth, and the air thrummed with pre-human song. There, the first clusters of eggs glistened in slick pools, iridescent, like droplets of oil, pulsing faintly with the rhythm of unseen currents. Shadows slid across the wall's Deepkind, not yet fully formed. Their translucent bodies caught between liquid and light. The scent was sharp with minerals and something older, a tang of genesis, the rich fermentation of emerging life. Elias hesitated, letting his lamp fall low. The colony leader, Varys, moved ahead, boots splashing in the phosphorescent puddles. Lyra stilled beside him, every muscle tense. As their eyes adjusted, they saw the Deepkind tending the nursery with delicate care-webbed hands, palpated the eggs, sending drifting flecks of light up to the uneven ceiling. No hostility, only silent guardianship, a vigilance ancient as the cave. One Deepkind peeled away from the cluster, approaching the humans. Its features were sharp, reflective, almost metallic in the lamplight. Its voice vibrated in the air, deep chords threading Elias's ribs. "You have come," it said, not in human tongue, but in that shivering resonance. Now, as Varys stepped forward, a careful negotiation began, words folding into gestures, meanings transferred as much in posture as sound. "We bring no harm," Varys offered, hands open. The deep kind watched, considering. Lyra felt something brush her mind, like a sudden gust. She turned, catching Elias's gaze, and realized the creature was inside their thoughts, drinking memories, tasting intentions. A gentle blue pulse moved through the room as more deep kind gathered. From the far pools, new forms rose, amphibious silhouettes elongated with the fluid grace of water-bound beasts, yet marked by unfamiliar intelligence. One cradled a cluster of hatchlings, copper-bright, trembling. "Why do you come?" It resonated. Elias, swallowing fear, answered, "To learn, to understand." Lyra touched his sleeve, and together they stepped forward. All around them, eggs shuddered, hatching, spilling finger-sized larvae into the pools. The air thickened, their breathing grew shallow, overwhelmed by possibility. "We knew of your waking," said the eldest deep kind. "We waited for the surface minds. Your digging awoke the old rivers." "We're sorry," Lyra whispered, shaken by the scale of what they'd disturbed. "We did not know who lived beneath." A silence fell. From the rear, May moved, gently setting down the battered medical satchel she'd rescued from the ruined corridor. The dim light cast unfamiliar shadows across the synthetic fabric as she knelt, her hands trembling slightly, but her voice careful and steady. "There might still be supplies inside," May said softly, glancing both at the quarried tunnel mouth and the figure Orson, who stood impossibly before them, incarnate proof that everything they understood about the underground city had been wrong. Bandages, medkits, and protein packs. If anyone needs, Orson's gaze, both hollow and ancient, lingered on the satchel as if remembering some analog in the lost world above. He stepped forward, the flickering glow revealing a weathered face, the lines of burden. "Let us share," he whispered, almost ritualistically. His voice reminded Ira of some half-buried wind, the kind that summons memory, not just sound. No one moved for a heartbeat. The stalemate was thick, more psychological than physical. Ira felt her own uncertainty ripple through the others, Torrin stiff and protective, Joss clutching his fractured scanner, May's gentle diplomatic silence. Orson spoke again, a little louder now. "Your quest has breached old walls and woken old hopes." Torrin inhaled sharply, the corners of his eyes drawn down in suspicion. "We thought nothing could survive here. We thought we were alone." He glanced at Ira, searching for agreement, but Ira couldn't give it. She was staring at Orson's hands, at the rough tools, the strange filaments braided through his sleeves, evidence of adaptation, survival, purpose. "Your people, how long have you been here?" she asked. Orson lowered his gaze, scanning the walls as if counting centuries. "Long enough that time lost meaning. We grew in the stone's embrace. Lost above, we learned below." May distributed a pair of sealed ration packs, old but intact, from the satchel. Orson gestured for her not to hand one to him first, instead giving the others a nod. "You are guests," he said. "Honor is given here." Ira accepted, the gesture both strange and comforting. "What happened to the upper city?" she asked, the question tumbling out. "Why did you hide? Why has no one come for you?" Orson's eyes dimmed, the light flickering across the features of someone haunted by memory. Orson's eyes dimmed, the light flickering across the features of someone haunted by memory. He looked back at the archway around which time itself seemed to have accumulated dust and regret. "There was no safe passage for me," he said quietly, voice echoing just enough to remind Meryn of the cavernous history between these walls. "After the breach, the attack, my kind were declared contaminants. The protocols were rewritten. The city above, it chose denial over restoration. You protected them, even when they abandoned you," Meryn said softly, realization dawning. He nodded, the motion almost imperceptible. "When you erase something, you erase the pain it represents." I became a secret nobody wished to remember. But I remained, a steward to the core systems, hoping for someone worthy to find me. Marin stepped closer, the gentle hum of the core audible beneath their feet. She held out the memory crystal, its data pulsing like a heartbeat. We will remember the protocols, the choices, the truth. There's still a chance for your code to rejoin the city, not as a tool, as history. His gaze lifted, blue fire returning. With this, the upper city can heal? Marin smiled with conviction. Only if we don't hide anymore. The ancient sensors around them glimmered. Something in the silence shifted. The air seemed to pulse with possibility. Orson looked to Marin, hope flashing through his synthetic skin like a shooting star. Beyond the vault doors, the city's upper lights flickered through rain and cloud. The encrypted door codes disengaged, a sign that something, somewhere, was changing. You must go, Orson commanded, urgency sharpening his words. The council will send drones soon. If you take the passage and reveal the crystal, they cannot erase me again. Marin hesitated, heart pounding, then placed a gentle hand atop Orson's metallic palm. You're not just a relic. You're the proof that what we make, what we try to forget, is still part of us. Orson smiled, a gesture full of bittersweet hope. Then run, Marin, carry memory. She turned, footsteps echoing up the winding stairs, the crystal clutched tight. Behind her, Orson faded into shadow, the soft blue glow undimmed, waiting, watching, woven forever into the city's hidden heart. Above, the council gathered in the storm-lit hall, faces creased with anticipation and fear. Lightning traced silver veins across the domed ceiling, illuminating Counselor Ashran's stern profile. The ancient sigil of Arian's guardians blazing above his left brow. Their voices murmured and rose, jostling for the shape of destiny in the shifting air. The grand doors burst open, Alria entered, her uniform darkened by rain and resolve, the radiant shimmer of Orson's lattice trailing faintly in her wake. All eyes turned. No longer mere captain, her presence carried the weight of truth, the echo of centuries unlocked. The tension snapped taut as she stepped forward, flanked by former adversaries who now walked in unity throughout the hall. Engineers, visionaries, and the last of the luminous Alria's voice, clear and sure, cut through the war of whispers. Arian is not simply a fortress, she announced. It's a living memory. We have seen its heart. Orson is awake. He knows what we have forgotten. The war that started our exile is closer than the Council ever dared admit. But knowledge itself is our weapon, and our salvation. The artifact, recovered and mysteriously humming, found its place at the table's center. As Alia laid it down, a shimmer played across the chamber, a low whisper weaving through the air. The language of Orson itself. The artifact pulsed, synchronizing with the city's energy grid. Lights flickered and steadied. Outside, the storm began to subside, the city's towers thrumming in harmony once more. Counselor Ashran approached, his ancient skepticism weathered by the evidence before him. You risked all protocol to awaken it, he said quietly. For this, resonance. Alia nodded. The old war returns in the cycle. You mustn't silence the city's memory. Let Orson guide us, or we splinter in ignorance. Damara, once her rival, stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with new respect. The Council can't resist the truth any longer. If we deny Orson now, we condemn ourselves to blindness. The Council's divisions, sharpened by fear and stubborn tradition, began to blur. Ashran, after a silent glance among them, bowed his head. We are architects of the possible, he intoned. Let history shape us anew. Alria placed her hand over the glowing crystal interface. Its light shimmered across her features, casting ripples over the old stone, the ancient glyphs. All those who had journeyed, sacrificed, dreamed, and defied stood at the threshold of transformation. In the hush, she breathed. Let us begin. The mechanism, awakened at last, sighed with centuries of memory. Patterns danced, energy wove through the conduit, reaching outward, upward into the tapestry of the city and sky. From the farthest towers to the roots below, Navarra quivered as history's grip released its hold. The walls opened to the dawn, the people drawn forth to witness the unfurling future. There was no cataclysm, only awakening. Algorithms recalibrated, old boundaries dissolved. The two halves of Navarra, flesh and code, stood together, uncertain but unafraid, linked by the soft hum of possibility. Aurea felt the surge within her. Not power, but potential. She turned to her companions, Ashran, Lyra, Dawan, even Sane, wounded but standing, tears glimmering in the curve of his smile. The city's voice, long dormant, drifted into the air, a mosaic of every inhabitant's longing. We are remade not by victory, but by understanding. Above them, the first rays of a new sun painted their faces, warm and golden. And in that light, as the ancient circuits melded with newfound purpose, Aurea stepped forward, shoulders squared, soul unburdened. Fate was no longer someone else's inscription. Across Navarra, people emerged, blinking, meeting others thought lost or estranged. Friends clasped hands, adversaries shared uncertain laughter. No one shrank from the work ahead, but hope stitched the rifts. The future would require patience, courage, imagination, but it belonged to all of them now. Aurea found Ashran's gaze, steady and kind. Now, she said, we build together. As the city's ancient heart pulsed anew, Navarra's age of division faded into legend. There would be stories of defiance, of love rediscovered, of faith in the unknown. But this day would be remembered as the day when the architects of the possible became the keepers of their own destiny. The sun rose higher, illuminating every promise.